Hey guys, All in Crypto here, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for what I hope for most of you has been a wonderful Wednesday to another YouTube video. Today we're going to be talking about Cardano, of course, and we're going to do things differently from yesterday's video. We're going to start things off with the technicals, as there's quite a lot to go over. We're going to start on the smaller time frames for Cardano, and then move to the larger, so we're going from the 4-hourly to the weekly. We're going to be talking about ADA, BTC, Cardano against Bitcoin, as it's at a pretty low point. And we have said, you know, you guys will remember that Cardano, to the kind of run up to $3, actually really led the market. Is a similar thing taking place today? We have a similar criteria to back then. So we're going to be talking about that. Of course, talking about Bitcoin. We do cover Bitcoin a lot more in our daily cryptocurrency market updates that come around 1 p.m. UK time every single day. Because we have maintained a stance that we're cautiously optimistic at the moment. The market, this is a frustrating market. I mean, that's a very, certainly on a small time frame or the short term, it's a very frustrating market because we've got a lot to contend with. So we will be talking about Bitcoin because it's important, looking at it on a number of time frames, and then we'll get into some Cardano related news. We've got some pretty significant news involving Cardano holders and how that's now at an all-time high, and a year to date has seen some significant growth. And also we'll be talking about the Cardano ETPs, which is exchange traded products that are now live on Europe's largest stock exchange. More of this is to come, ladies and gentlemen. It won't be long before we get a spot Cardano ETF within the United States. Of course, we're going to have to get a Bitcoin one first, and then kind of go down that linear growth route that, you know, the likes of Grayscale did with their GBTC, and then they added Ethereum, and then they added your large cap altcoins. You know, it's going to be no different for ETFs, certainly spot ETFs, which are hugely bullish for the crypto space. So let's get into it, guys. Let's start by taking a look at the overall market. Bit of a down day today. That has really been led by Bitcoin. And we have done a lot of coverage on Bitcoin. We were actually expecting some consolidation. You know, we've been watching this MACD bullish cross, and we've been telling you guys every time you have this cross, so you've got one here, you had one here, you had one back here, you had one here, you know, you also, you can see what happens. You get a period of consolidation. That's what we've been expecting. If we drop down the time frames, we might as well start with Bitcoin whilst we're here. It's not it's not amazing what I'm seeing. The kind of patterns that we had in play, where of course you guys know we broke out of what we were calling, and I'll draw it very quickly, a ascending triangle. You essentially broke out of that, what was significant resistance. You broke it. You kind of came back to test it as support, and you're right up on that support at the moment. My worry, and I'll fly through Bitcoin very quickly. We did cover it in more detail in my daily cryptocurrency market update, which is always well worth a watch. My worry is that you're kind of now forming a descending triangle that potentially may take you back into the structure that you've just broken out of. And that's something that I'm certainly watching. You know, have you now invalidated and come back inside of this? You know, it's not perfect, if that makes sense. And markets are somewhat directionless at the moment. You know, you are still in a larger downtrend. You were making headway here, but you have, of course, seen a spill to the downside. And there's a lot going on internally with markets. You know, on chain, things don't look too bad at all, but the price has kind of seen quite a separation from your on-chain metrics over the past half a year or so. So let's dive into Cardano. Let's actually start on the smaller time frames. You guys know, let's recap on what we were looking at yesterday. We were indeed looking, you know, we've got this head and shoulders, reverse head and shoulders that we're looking for as a setup. It's not been validated yet, but it hasn't been invalidated. On the short-term time frame, we were looking for an ascending triangle that has more of a probability of breaking to the upside than the downside. Typically, on law of averages, they break up rather than down. It's more of a bullish pattern than it is a bearish one. You'd also made really good headway, and this is such a significant level where you're currently at, and this would have essentially given you your weak right shoulder that would have took you well on your journey to your next sort of target, which would have been round about up here at 160. You have invalidated this ascending triangle, and you have essentially sold below it. And some key levels that I'm certainly watching for is, if I believe that this is a left shoulder, head, and that we are forming that right shoulder, which we still potentially are, you do not want to come with your right shoulder back lower than your left shoulder, because it somewhat invalidates it. Not perfectly, but we're really looking for, as a medium, this sort of $1 level. We don't want to go below that. In fact, we kind of want to come up and consolidate. What we'll do is switch to the daily to show you that on a larger time frame, because it still very much does look to me like a reverse head and shoulders is forming, or some people are calling this a cup and handle. I think the head and shoulder scenario is probably more likely, although, technically, we'll get rid of this EMA because it's not really useful on these kind of time frames. This is definitely what we're calling our armpits, and you could potentially be forming this. But the short-term time frame that we have in the 4-hourly, it really gets invalidated by the overall sway of the markets. Bitcoin is still very much leading these markets, and the confluence to that is the fact that the entire market sold off with Bitcoin. Of course, altcoins sell off more significantly, some more volatilely than others. But ultimately, it's not really anything to panic about at the moment. But we are, the reasons that I'm cautiously optimistic, again, I had quite a few comments yesterday saying, less worry or don't be so pessimistic. I'm not pessimistic. Those of you that have been watching me for long enough will know that nobody is more bullish on the crypto space than I am. I think this is a technology that is going to change the world. But there's a journey to get to that. There's a journey to get to adoption, every single day, and we're going to get into some news showing adoption and how we've seen continuation of it, despite the price action, in just a second. There's a journey that we've got to go on, and certainly short term, things are looking rather choppy. And I've actually, if I'm being honest, during this time period, given everything that's gone on, I would have expected Bitcoin to do better than it has. It's acting a lot more. I really do not like the correlation that Bitcoin has with the NASDAQ. That does not fill me with joy. Long term, we're extremely bullish for crypto. Short term, we're witnessing very choppy action. And the structure that we had yesterday, we can get rid of this target now, got invalidated. And that's how technicals go. When we lay down a pattern for you guys, setting triangle, head and shoulders, it's a probability-based thing. These patterns typically play out to one way or the other. Not a guarantee. It's a probability-based thing. And you can see the second you invalidate it. So my stops, for example, were on this trend line. The second we put a toe below here, I'm out, because that whole structure's been invalidated, and then you don't want to hang on to what is now a losing trade. And really, I'm an investor, not a trader. But this is certainly, you don't want to come back to this sort of $1 level. In fact, I wouldn't like to see us come back to sort of $1.02. Anywhere around this kind of region, it is not perfect in my opinion. And you are somewhat having support here, but it's not strong support at all. You can see just how many times you've kind of come down and hit your head here. 1, 2, and now 3, and you're kind of putting a toe below it. So we will see. Obviously, Cardano's price is very tethered to the overall market. The interesting thing, even though it's a very frustrating market, and we do still envision a potential head and shoulders, reverse head and shoulders playing out, that would of course take you to your target round about here, and then this larger head and shoulders would take you back up above and beyond your all-time highs, which would be perfect. Talking about the bigger term timeframes, which of course is important, are we about to contradict's probably not the right word. Are we about to do something completely different to what we've previously done? Are for the first time we about to not see a run up to a hard fork? And are we for the first time about to not get continuation from this MACD bullish cross? And we will move on to ADA BTC in a second, and then of course the news. Just important because there's a lot going on. Even though markets are very boring, you want to take the data that they're giving you. So day to day, your charts are giving you little hints. Okay, well, this is happening, so that means it's invalidated this, or it's going to invalidate this, or is you want to be kind of reading these as you're seeing it. Ultimately, I think BTC does look set for continuation to the upside. This could just be a small pullback before that continuation. Remember, it has done a pretty significant move from, we'll use this low here. Very typical that you get a pullback, a healthy pullback at that. You also have for Cardano, this kind of neckline that we've got down here and this one here are actually some of your Fibonacci levels. So rejection from it, it was a number of, it had a number of significant points to it, if that makes sense. But back to the your bigger sort of term time frame. What we'll do is we'll get rid of these for now on the big term, and I'll use that arrow actually. Every time you have a hard fork, forgive me whilst I just delete all this, guys. Every time you have a hard fork, historically, you get a run to the upside. Of course, Alonso was the last one, and now we've got the Vasil hard fork. Are for the first time we not going to get that run up? Well, I would argue that we probably still are. You know, it's not. It would be the first time we haven't, and also you've got this MACD bullish cross, which if you go and draw and put a line through all your other MACD bullish crosses and look at what the price action did after, it continued to the upside. I'll do that very quickly just to validate the point that I am trying to make. And what we'll even do is we'll even do one in trickier market conditions, just so that we're being fair here. So if you look, whenever you've had one of these bullish MACD crosses previously, throughout, you know, Cardano's existence, certainly on a weekly time frame, you've seen continuation to the upside. Can you see this? Sometimes you've had a bit of a rest, like what we've got over here, but you've seen that continuation. You had one over here, you went up. Had one today. Are we going to actually just completely throw all that out the window and go for the first time, okay, we're not going to go up? I don't think so. I'm leaning more towards the bigger time frames and what they're telling me. I think, you know, when you drop down your short terms, you know, you got a lot of, you got Bitcoin really throwing things about, and the space as a whole is getting thrown about by everything going on elsewhere and the uncertainty that's taking place, which is why it's always important to focus on what's being built. There's a lot of great things being built on top of ADA, and there's a lot of great things coming out of the crypto space. You've got a lot of big players involved in it that aren't going anywhere. The real shock for me was, why on earth did we not see huge price appreciation off the news from the UK in regards to the Exchequer essentially coming out and saying they want to make the UK the home or the global hub for the cryptocurrency market. That's huge news, and the market actually sold off on it, which really is a kind of representation of the overall sentiment and everything going on. Now, that's enough of the technicals, or very quickly we'll fly past BTC, and then we'll dive into some of the other news that we've got for you, and we'll wrap this video up there. When we take a look at ADA BTC, which is a really significant one to look at, you had your hard fork over here, obviously March 2020, and you saw this bullish MACD cross. You've got one here today, guys. You know, every time you've had one of these, you've seen ADA actually gain quite significant ground against Bitcoin. You've had one down here at quite a low point on the charts for Cardano versus Bitcoin, and it's very much similar to what took place here. So we had this MACD cross for ADA BTC, and then you see ADA actually outperform the market, and ADA put in a new high from May, well before many of your other altcoins. In fact, I think it might have even put a new high in before Bitcoin. If we look at the top there, that was the 30th of August. If you look for Bitcoin, the actual new high, was that a new high? Was the 21st of October. So is Cardano about to start leading the market again? Potentially. You've got the kind of criteria there that would potentially validate that. But there's a lot going on technically. You know, I still, of course, have an overarching bullish bias. I just think that midterm, you know, things are very choppy. We're not seeing anything kind of run away, and everything is still tethered to Bitcoin and the overall kind of market sentiment. But I am still expecting a breakout for ADA. I am still looking at that potential reverse head and shoulders that we're currently in the process of forming as a scenario and a potential play. And I do, you know, I speak to a lot of traders. I have a lot of traders in my circle. These are very frustrating markets for them, which of course tells you a lot. Let's talk about some of the news. ADA holders are on the rise. The number of Cardano holders addresses with a balance has recently reached a new all-time high. There are now 5.9 million addresses holding ADA, and increased by a whopping 48.8% year to date. So despite the price action over the past 7 months now, the growth for ADA in terms of people using it and its adoption, and this is just one metric of many that suggests this, has continued to excel, and the price is just simply not reflecting that. And people often think it's very strange when I talk about the price not actually reflecting the product that it's trying to represent. But you can see cases of this throughout, markets across the board. It's not uncommon that this is the case, and it certainly, in my opinion, is the case here. And value sometimes can take a little bit of time to get realized. We've got this blossoming ecosystem that's booming on the Cardano space, and there's many, in my opinion, things to be bullish on with ADA that people just simply aren't. And it's a very interesting time to be alive, put it that way, guys, in terms of everything going on a kind of macro scale. This, of course, is some more news here. Cardano, Polkadot, Solana, ETPs, which just means exchange traded products, debut on Europe's largest stock exchange today. Let's read a little bit of this, actually. And as the interest in cryptocurrency exchange-traded products, ETPs, grows, 3 such products have recently arrived on the European's largest stock exchange, increasing the digital asset exposure to investors. Specifically, the Swiss asset manager VECHAIN Incorporated, a subsidiary of DeFi Technology Incorporated, has begun trading VECHAIN Cardano, VECHAIN Polkadot, and VECHAIN Solana on the Euronext exchange in Paris and Amsterdam on April the 6th. The fintech company announced in the press release shared by PRN Newswire. This is a trend that we're going to see continue. Many of these exchange-traded products are going to have to be backed by ADA. We did speak about the Chicago Mercantile Exchange exploring the option of derivatives, so futures for the likes of Cardano, Solana, I think were the two mentioned. Derivatives, futures aren't great because they don't have to be backed. You're essentially speculating on the price. It's a derivative. But, this is kind of the fact that the demand is there is really the bullish element to take of that. The fact that their futures isn't great because you don't need it, anything to really back it. You don't need spot to back it. But eventually I do believe that you will have a array of ETFs, spot ETFs, coming for the cryptocurrency space. I think once we get sort of regulatory clarity, which we know we're getting in the UK, we're getting it in the US, these kind of products will sort of unfold. And you've got the SEC right now that are really, crypto is really in their focus. So that is really all I have for you in this video, guys. Just some interesting things I thought was worth paying attention to. I'm still cautiously optimistic. I'm very optimistic about ADA. Also, you kind of hit your head on this weekly 20 EMA, which I'm not a big fan of. But that is really all I have for you in this video, guys. If you enjoy the content, a like is always appreciated. So is a comment, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next YouTube video. Thanks a lot for watching, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesdays.